Debs.
Lor, are you all right?
Yeah, I'm doing all right. I've had a good week.
Oh, nice.
Loved listening to the incredible voices that we've been getting some voice notes for to contribute to this series. It's been a joy, hasn't it?
Just being able to reach out amazing. And connect. Yeah, and also the words of wisdom that have come through and the, I suppose, the awareness. We don't normally hear what it really is like. And I think to be able to bring that to the forefront to go, oh, yeah, because I know, I'm my son's now 32, as you know, and that feels like it's an age away when I was having to do the juggling of parenting, returning to work, all of that. But there's loads of people that are having newbies all the time now.
Yeah, and last week I didn't get an opportunity to shoehorn anything about robots and AIs.
Oh damn! Are you going to do that today?
Well, surely, Des. If there was a visual example of the human edge,
yes,
and what is it humans can do that AIs and robots and all that kind of automated stuff can do, well, they can't have babies. This is the human edge.
It is.
And where it takes energy to create one... Energy and connection to create one. It takes energy and connection to raise a baby. And what we wanted to focus on was almost shine a light on all the unsung, hidden work that goes on behind the scenes in terms of making that balance work. So our first focus was looking at identity shifts, like who am I now? How do you wrap your head around someone who might be top of their game professionally or really enjoys what role that they do, and suddenly you're about to become a complete beginner and a novice in something that, the books will tell you what to do, but it's only when you're there at midnight. You're making the decision. Do I give it Calpol or not?
Pick him up, put him down. Yeah, what do I do?
What do I do with it? And then our last focus looked at, well, what does that mean practically as well as emotionally to make that shift, navigate between work and home and making that shift from parent to colleague. And this one, we're going to be looking at how do we optimize that return to work bit.
Yes.
And what's just been a joy is being able to splice this in with real life voice notes from real life parents from all walks of life and all parts of the world. And Debs, unlike maybe some of other topics, we haven't needed to Google this one because you, my friend, have been working there in the background as one of your passion projects, working as a parent coach for a number of different organisations behind the years, helping countless people feel a little bit stronger and more set up to be able to make that return to work after having a child. So I'd love to hear your thoughts, Debs. What are some of the key themes that you have heard over the years when people are making that return to work? And in particular, Debs, what do we need to understand about returning parents?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I've been very privileged and I just love it. But I think you're right. I think a lot of them carry what we call invisible worries around what's going on. And it starts even before they go back into work or their day of due date to return to work. And that's why when we're working with people, we sort of pick them up 3 months after baby's been born or adopted, or then we will pick them up again after their first kit day, which is keeping in touch day. And then we pick them up probably towards just before they return. And then we pick up them again twice after, so that we have that whole experience with them, which is just a privilege to see, because we can talk all about it until they work back into work, because things like, can I still do this? Am I able? Will people see me really differently now that I'm a parent? Have I lost credibility? All of the doubt that comes in. What happens, again, going back to what we talked about, which is the biggest question: how do I manage it if my child isn't well? And obviously, as we sort of said last time, some families have children that are not well, and it's again navigating that landscape to help them realize that they're not alone, first of all, and if they've got a really supportive employer, then you can see the difference to those that haven't. So we never know. I mean, children are so unpredictable that we have to be aware of what could might be coming up or might be on their radar, and still supporting them with that. So I think that's really important for us to consider, because as we said, that the emotional adjustment is huge, and the mental load that people carry, people don't see that. I think people come across as being or appearing to be very capable, and really on it. And they come back, I think, carrying more than just their laptop they come back with, or a diary. They actually come back, carrying what we talked about before was the emotional load, but also the planning, as you mentioned, the logistical nightmare that it can be. And also, as we talked earlier, at the first one, the shift in identity. And I think that's something that people don't see going on. And the space that we give people enables them to just be them. I'm not here to tell them how to raise their children or babies. That's not my job. I'm here to work with them. And I think that's the bit they have a voice and a space where they can go, I don't know if I can do this, or, what things have changed. I think you mentioned, one of your people that a system change, anything like that going. You've been out a year, then you're going back in, and the whole IT system's, flipped on its head. It's how do you manage that? So all of that will be internally going on for people, and you may not see it at all because they're very good at masking some of this stuff.
I've got a reflection on the back of something you just said in that bit, and then I've got a question to ask you. My reflection is, although we've called this Working Parents Making the Balance Work, Working Parents with a capital W, capital P, it's not one title that fits all. Behind that is as many different storylines as there are humans. And I think, even just one parent saying to another, just drop your kid off at school. I don't know what all the fuss is about. We'll make the meeting start at 9:15. It's fine. Yeah. If I haven't had the experience of my kid having a complete meltdown and it taking hours to get that child in a state to be able to even be, leaving the house, for example, for me to just glibly say, just drop your kid off at school, because my experience as a working parent might be vastly different from someone else. So I guess it's like any of these characteristics. Yes, it might be we have in common that we have created offspring, or we are now looking after, a young person, but it doesn't mean that we're all in that same boat, because if you've got a nanny and a cook and a chef and a driver and a gardener and a chauffeur. Yeah. I don't know if you have a chauffeur and a driver, but let's just say.
Well, let's just say,
if you had all of the manpower that it would take an incredibly wealthy person, for example, to rear children, then I'm sure we all could have amazing hair and makeup every day. But the reality is, behind the scenes, there are people doing their best to do 101 different jobs to even make that morning work. But I guess the point I wanted to land is just because you've got two people that are working parents that are colleagues, their experiences will be vastly different. And in fact, I guess what we're talking about is you can't judge anyone, because unless you've actually lived in that person's household and seen the reality, it might not be quite as easy as it might have been for someone else.
I think that's such a good point, actually, Lor, because again, people don't necessarily share what's going on behind the scenes, if that means, because they fear of judgment. When people, and they open up and they say, my third child, I'm having my third child now, but the first child has just been, given a diagnosis of ADHD or dyslexia. They may not have told their workplace that. So that's added pressure, but they're very comfortable to share that with us, because that gives you another layer of stuff that they're having to then navigate their way through, as well as look after their others. So I think you're absolutely right. Just because we're parents, we all have very different experiences. And just to say, well, when I was a mum, this is what I did. That's the last thing people want to hear, because they don't care what you did, because you're not in their shoes, because their circumstances are so different to what ours. I mean, even ours would be different with ours. But I think that's the thing. It's don't just assume that everybody has the same experience of you, good, bad, or indifferent.
Yeah.
Good point.
Yeah. And I think just complete random, but it kind of links into all this because it's about home life, work life. I remember when things were starting to kick off about returning to work and where organisations were sort of saying, right, that's it, everyone in for 3 days a week, rather than kind of as and when. And one of the clients we were working with, everyone really kicked off about the financial impact that was going to have.
Yeah.
And you could really see a disconnect between the frontline teams and the heads of, because an extra $4,000 a year commuting doesn't mean that much if you're on 120 grand. It means an awful lot if you're on 26 grand. And there was just a lack of understanding about actually £4,000 means very different things to different people.
Absolutely.
Depending on where you sit in that organisational pay structure.
Yeah.
And I think it's the same with, parents. Someone might say, why don't they just get childcare? Well,
they might not have like 1,500 quid a week to spend.
No, because that's just the way the world works. And, and it won't last forever, but behind the scenes, there's a lot of work that's going on just to get yourself kind of ready for work.
Yes.
So I'd love to ask you, Debs, what are some stories or examples that you've heard of where organisations are maybe unintentionally overlooking brilliant talent because they're so busy dealing with whatever is going on behind the scenes?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, I think that's a good question, because what do people measure? Are they measuring, because visibility and value are not the same thing. So are they thinking about, unconsciously maybe, that they do reward visibility? You're always in the office, you're always working late, you're always present, you turn up to every meeting. They're constantly available and they're always on, whereas actually they might not be adding value. So I think people underestimate that, you can do a lot if you're given an hour just to crack on and do something. And that could add an enormous amount of value, but it's taking you 1 hour. And I think that's the bit that people need to think about is, because parents are, I think they're one of the most super efficient at managing their time and energy really, really well, because they have to make it more intentional, that, they don't have to be present at work all the time. And I think it goes back to your coming in for 3 days a week or 4 days a week. You must sit at your desk between 9 and 5, or you can only be on the shop floor at this time and this time. Actually, that's like stifling sometimes, because they could still get the job done more efficiently, more effectively, because as a parent, you are so used to having to juggle that and being super quick. Even now with my mum, she always says to me, when we have dinner together, and she said, God, you eat your dinner so quickly. And I went, do I? Like that? And I'm thinking, yeah, I do, because I can just get something in and still work in that half hour that I've got before I have to maybe look after her. So you do not lose that efficiency, I don't think. And it's only when she pointed it out to me that I went, do I? She's still eating.
As you're burping and hiccuping for the whole night after.
I need some
back to the baby care.
Some burping. Yeah.
Debs needs winding.
I need winding now. And I think this is where organisations have to be super careful that they're not equating that long hours with commitment. And I think, and that pressure of being present does not determine whether you're a great leader or you have leadership potential either. And I think that's what some organisations, I'm not saying all of them, can overlook parents sometimes because their working patterns are very different. And I think it comes back to that awareness of, it has all changed, and how adaptable are we? Do we still get the job done? And I think there's so many questions that are out there about it, because some make visibility a value. But actually, by doing that, you're overlooking some incredibly talented people who can turn something around in half an hour, where somebody who hasn't got that other learn about time and energy might take 4 hours because they're fannying around with it. Whereas a parent will just go pragmatically, right, I need to get from here to here. How do I do that? And that's what I see a lot in the parents that I work with, is that practical, pragmatic approach. It's got to be done. I'm going to make it happen. And they have boundaries as well, which is always fascinating.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I now use the train. If I'm traveling, I will use the train to do work, whereas before I would have watched something.
Yeah,
but
interesting, isn't it? Yeah.
It's then making the decision of, I mean, I'm self-employed, so it's a bit different, but
Yeah.
actually, I'd rather sit for half an hour, read a story, whereas I could have kind of, well, this is when she was younger. She don't want me doing that now.
She doesn't want you doing that now. No.
Are you okay?
Yeah. Yes.
All right, yeah, fine, okay. Yeah, just back to the glory days of when she actually wanted me around.
She still wants you, Laura. It's just different,
she does.
right?
Yeah, just when she needs to buy something or an app be agreed on the phone. Yeah. That level, strategic thinking in a 13-year-old.
Oh my God,
they
good. Are super smart.
Absolutely.
I never underestimate that. Yeah.
The hustle starts at 5 p.m. Oh,
yes.
Mommy, I really like the way you've done your eyeliner today. Oh,
yeah.
And 2 hours later, can I send you? Sorry, what? Right.
Smart people, right?
Smart people. We're going to need smart kids, Debs, who are able to bring some rebel ideas, as well. All of us adults are there on ChatGPT going, how do I lead my life? Anyway.
Yes.
Yes, I think that's interesting from a time perspective. And I can't wait to hear now a couple of voices sharing their thoughts, particularly around from an organisation perspective, what's really useful to know about someone who's on that return to work process.
Returning to work feels like you are taking a big step into a new world. It feels like you've been in a bit of a fog, baby land, listening to Miss Rachel, those of you that know that station on YouTube, or, dealing with baby talk and crawling and, feeding your baby and looking up allergies and foods and purees and baby-led weaning versus, all the different controversial topics on children's, upbringing. And then you go into like, oh, I've got to turn my brain on for work. And can I even do that again? And so I remember the first meeting I had to go to, I was so nervous. And I kept saying in the meeting, like, hey guys, sorry, I still have mom brain. I may not be as sharp. And I almost said it to kind of be a cover in case I didn't feel like, my answers were good enough. And I remember kind of killing it in the meeting, and they all looked at me and said, are you sure you still have mom brain? And I kind of laughed and realized, it's all there. It's all still there. That part of me didn't go away. And it's like once you step back in it, you shake off the cobwebs and you're there and you're sharper and sometimes even better than you were before, because you've had to manage just such a huge amount of information and stress and, just responsibility. And, you have more, I guess, bandwidth than you think.
Returning to work felt exciting and a return to my quote-unquote old life, but also it was nerve-wracking having been away for over a year. I wasn't quite sure how I was going to balance the nursery pickups, the commutes and my workload, and how I'd be welcomed back into the team. But I found that with the right support from my line manager and my colleagues was really key to easing me through the transition.
Returning to work following maternity leave was bittersweet for me personally. It felt like the bubble I'd created with my child was popped, and I was thrust back into the world of work, having to leave my child to be able to return to the workplace. However, it was also a really great thing for me, because at my point of return to work, I did feel like I needed more adult interaction. I felt like the baby groups that I was attending wasn't giving me enough of what I needed to be the person I was before I was mum. And that was so helpful to my mental health and to my professional development that I was able to pick my return time and was welcomed back very warmly by the company.
So Debs, let's have a chat about a very real part of the work that we do, so putting on learning and development for organisations. I've definitely noticed a trend this side of the pandemic where when people are invited to or offered the option to come on, for example, a leadership development residential.
Yeah.
Pre-pandemic, there was if you can't stay overnight, then you're not coming on it.
Yes.
And I have noticed a flexing and more open-mindedness to, well, if staying overnight isn't going to work for your family setup, that's okay.
Yeah.
You can still access that learning, because there potentially are lots and lots of fantastic aspiring leaders who just can't sleep overnight in a hotel because they might be the only or a key caregiver to a child.
Yeah, I think you're right. And that ability to recognise what that person might need in that moment. And I love the fact that, people are starting to realise that actually their life does not revolve around work, which is why we flipped our work-life balance to life-work balance or harmony, to be able to take account of where the world's been and where it's going to. And I think that people can really help returning parents by creating that trust, first of all, and that's okay. There's an acknowledgement that you have a life outside of work, and that you have that level of flexibility, and that goes back to the psychological safety that people create in that workspace that enables people to feel like they can speak up and ask or say, and therefore, given realistic expectations around, well, what is expected. So, we've done it on workshops, haven't we, Lor, where, we might have pushed the start time slightly back. So somebody could drop their child at nursery and then come on to the workshop, because why wouldn't you?
Absolutely. And likewise with end times. The number of session times where people might say, actually, I've got to go and collect my kid. I need to leave at 4. And then someone else says, actually, me too. And then when you ask a group, how about we compress lunch and then we finish at 4? And you see everyone going, oh, thank goodness for
thank
that.
God.
Because even if you haven't got a kid to pick up, people have got other things that they kind of need to do. And I think most people would rather... have that, and then you
have
can
that flexibility.
And then you can have it all. And there's no rule written down that every session has to finish at 16:45.
Oh gosh, no. I mean, we don't work that way anyway, thankfully. But you're right.
They'll start hating you anyway, and they won't be learning.
Because you'll be watching the clock, going, "Are they going to finish? Are they going to finish?"
Yeah.
Because I think that's the key around. You still have to get the work done. I get that. But it can still be done with a level of flexibility and adaptability. And also choice, I think, is something that if we can have a conversation, and maybe managers, leaders have a conversation with their colleague or whoever, says, I understand that. Help me understand, how we're going to still ensure we reach our deadline. So what's your thoughts? Not dictating to them, you must go home and work, but asking them in that approach that says, so, what's going to enable you to still deliver on that piece of work that we need by, I don't know, tomorrow at, 5:00 in the afternoon or something. So you can talk about it and agree a way forward, compare what, where we're at, what we can do. And I think that's respect, really. It's not bending over backwards, or it's not giving other people preferential treatment over others. I think it is this being able to being clear on communication, creating clarity about what is and what happened, will happen, but also being able to take into consideration somebody else's circumstances, because that comes from a place of compassion and kindness, right?
Yeah.
And as long as you've had that conversation that says, I need this out, because if you're a manager, I'm just going to put this in my bonnet. If you're telling someone, or you haven't told somebody, oh, by the way, I need that by 3:00 this afternoon, and they're hearing you say that at 2:00 in the afternoon, you're not a great leader or manager, because you haven't considered what your team are being or what they're currently working on. So I think managers, leaders maybe have to be a little bit more proactive in thinking about what's coming. And yes, we always have emergencies, I get that, but not just expecting, because you can drop everything and do it, that everybody else can. And that's not just working parents, but I think they forget that. And then that's what builds on guilt for the parent. And it just becomes a minefield. And then that relationship becomes quite fragile. And people don't want that. The best conversation you can have with someone is, so what support helps you do your best work now? Rather than assuming what somebody needs, don't ever assume what a parent needs, or anybody really, but most importantly, I think it's making sure you're creating the environment where people, can succeed without actually breaking themselves in order to do that. But that takes a lot of self-awareness in whoever your manager leader is, right? And understanding that, like we do, just because, Carl is 32 now, it doesn't mean I don't understand what's going on for you and your girl, because there's an age gap. You never forget that, or you shouldn't forget that. That's my bee in my bonnet. I'll get off my soapbox now.
Debs. Oh, I love it, Debs. Because it's the compassionate bit. And I've got a curveball bit that I'll do as the final message just to make you laugh. But let's hear from a couple more voices, because I think this idea about what do we need to know to understand about returning parents, this is life stuff, not just whether you're a working parent or not, but what really helps. Let's hear for some more voices.
As a working parent, the thing nobody prepared me for was the fact that work can actually feel like a break. When I heard people say this before I had a child, I thought it sounded like a bonkers sentiment. In fact, dressing for work, getting on the train, collaborating with colleagues over coffee, having a nice lunch, can all indeed feel like a bit of a break from the physical rigours of childcare.
As a working parent, the thing that no one prepared us for was... So on a practical level, that first year of your child being in a childcare setting, how much sickness and illnesses they pick up, it's just wild. And then having to manage between the two of you how you're gonna manage that with work. But the second thing was, despite me having a year out of work, which I feel very fortunate that I was able to do so, I really felt the push-pull of returning. So obviously practically having to return to work financially, but also wanting to keep one foot on the ladder with my career that I'd worked really hard for. But like emotionally, I felt like I was going against the grain of what was natural for me, and that was to be there and look after my baby. And it felt so unnatural handing her over to a professional, albeit a stranger, and I just wasn't ready for that, and it floored me actually. So that's something that we were not prepared for.
As working parents, the thing nobody prepared us for was the guilt that you feel. The guilt for having to use before school and after school clubs to ensure that you're able to be in the office and be present at work whilst missing that key time with your children. It's the guilt that you feel when you're not able to make every single assembly that you're invited to, or every sports day, or every event that the school wants you to attend with your children. Whether that is chaperoning a trip or just being able to do the school run at normal times with all the other parents.
As a working parent, the thing nobody prepared me for was the fact that work can actually feel like a break. When I heard people say this before I had a child, I thought it sounded like a bonkers sentiment. In fact, dressing for work, getting on the train, collaborating with colleagues over coffee, having a nice lunch, can all indeed feel like a bit of a break from the physical rigours of childcare.
Now, Debs, you mentioned about being proactive. Now, let's just be super proactive. I always like to think long game.
Yes.
So any organisation that is hoping to have a customer, a patient, a client pipeline that lasts for anything longer than 20 years, you need working parents to be able to return into your workplace. Otherwise, how is that next customer pipeline going to be raised and reared and have a positive perspective about your industry or whatever it is that your kind of sector you're providing?
Yeah,
so
true.
I think playing long term, if today's workers are generating tax for the current people that are retired and the young kids that are getting educated, well, at some point we're all going to be moving on one bit. And in order for me, as a 40, coming up to 50-year-old, to have any likelihood of having a state pension, for anyone else who's in that same age as me, that's going to be today's babies that are going to be generating our state pension, if we're lucky enough to then have that. So if I'm going to play the long game here, it is in everyone's best interest to ensure that working parents are set up to be able to navigate the return into work. Otherwise, how do you make work if it is impossible for anyone to be able to have a professional life and a parental life?
Yeah, definitely.
Then the math doesn't add up. We have to make returning parents to work. We have to enable that process to work. So I'm thinking long game here.
I love that. Yeah, because I think organisations can really stop and think about that. I think people underestimate that whole workforce of working parents. I think sometimes, and this is my perception, they do get overlooked. And I think they need to think about how do workplaces evolve in order to make sure that, we're working alongside real human lives. And like you mentioned last time, it's not just necessarily people with bringing up their children. It could also be the carers as well, the other end of the, as well. So how do organisations, when they're having people return to work, how do they set up that environment so that they do evolve against humans and real life is going on? And I think it's, I don't think we can separate that any longer. No. And I think that's what's really important to understand, that, you may or may not have children of your own, but you still have to have an awareness of your team around you and what their circumstances are. Because I think that environment where people can succeed is the one that's going to enable your organisation to thrive and survive, regardless, because you've cared enough. You're, because you've been responsible enough and realising that those people, people matter, and especially working parents. You don't underestimate what they bring. Because that's the hardest thing I see if I'm coaching somebody, where they might get overlooked for something, and it is heartbreaking because somebody above them hasn't really thought about it or it's given them consideration in the way, and you just think you're missing a trick. This person is amazing. So it's always an interesting battle.
So, Debs, of all of these conversations, I mean, it's just been some brilliant ones that we've had. I've really enjoyed this, and I'm looking forward to our fourth and final one, which will be looking particularly around how to keep your confidence and self-belief up. So it'd be a nice way to just kind of wrap up this 4-part focus, looking at working parents, making the balance work. What would your call to action be for this one, Debs, about that return to work process?
I think my question is going to be aimed at those that lead parents, or are managers, and said themselves, or leaders themselves as parents, is if you lead people, ask yourself the following: would the parents in my team say they feel supported or simply accommodated?
Debs. Nice question. And my one would be, I've got 2 people that are flashing into mind at the moment who are leaders on leadership workshops I've been running this week. 2 different clients, different industries, and 2 people saying, I've actually got someone returning from mat leave who's starting in September. I'm going to get them to listen to this. So if you know someone with whom has got someone who's returning from parental leave, get them to listen to this, because that is going to enable us to have just a little bit more understanding as to what might have gone on from them. Yes, it's hugely exciting times and emotional times, but there are also some, some heavy lifting, as there are for all of us. So what we wanted to hope on this mini-series, it's not excluding people that aren't working parents.
No.
But we've all had parents ourselves, and maybe they worked or they didn't work, and life, as you said, is evolving rapidly fast, and this is an opportunity just to kind of check in, catch up and think, are there some things that we can do that could maybe tweak and adjust and make it an even better workplace experience? So Debs, it's been a joy having this conversation. I can't wait for the 4th one.
Absolutely. No, nor me, Lor. I'm looking forward to that one. That's a big topic.
Big topic. Confidence, self-belief.
Yeah.
Let's get Googling. I'm going to ask ChatGPT.
I don't think we need to, Lor, because we hear that all the time, don't we? I think we've got it. Yeah, I love that.
Thousands of Post-it note images I've accumulated over the years. I know you as well, of what's going to help me to feel more confident, because that's often the ultimate thing people are wanting from any session that they're on.
Definitely.
So, Debs, have an awesome week.
You too, lovely, and I'll see you on the next one.
Love you.
Bye.
We hope you've enjoyed this podcast. We'd love to hear from you. Email us at contact@secretsfromacoach.com, or follow us on Insta or Facebook. If you're a Spotify listener, give us a rating as it's easier for people to find us. And if you want to know more, visit our website, www.secretsfromacoach.com, and sign up for our newsletter. Here to cheer you on and help you thrive in the ever-changing world of work.